Have you ever heard of the war that nearly brought the Roman Republic to its knees?
No, it wasn't Hannibal and his elephants, or the Gauls sacking Rome. This was a war from within. A fire ignited by the most oppressed people in the Roman world, the enslaved. This is the story of the First Servile War, an uprising so massive and so brutal that it sent shockwaves through the very heart of the Republic. Picture this. Sicily, 135 BCE. It's not the idyllic island we imagine today. Under Roman rule, it has become a massive agricultural factory, a granary for the growing city of Rome. Vast estates, called latifundia, are worked by hundreds of thousands of enslaved people, captured in Rome's relentless wars of expansion. They are Celts, Thracians, Greeks, Syrians, people from all corners of the known world, stripped of their freedom and forced into brutal labor under the Sicilian sun. Conditions were beyond horrific. These men and women were often branded, shamed, and worked to death. They were given just enough food to survive, treated not as humans, but as tools, vocal implements, as one Roman writer chillingly put it. Imagine the despair, the constant hunger, the loss of family and home. For many, there was no hope, no future. But when you push people to the absolute limit, something is bound to break. And break it did. The spark was lit by a man named Eunus, a Syrian slave on an estate in the city of Eunus. Eunus was a charismatic figure, a mystic who claimed to be a prophet. He performed magic tricks, breathing fire and receiving visions from the Syrian goddess Aton. He told his fellow slaves that the gods had destined him to be a king. His owner, a cruel man named Demophilus, would mockingly call him King Eunus at dinner parties. He had no idea how true that title would become. Eunus wasn't just talk. He organized a core group of about 400 followers. One night, they armed themselves with whatever they could find: kitchen knives, farming tools, anything, and stormed the city of Eunus. The revolt was sudden and savage. Years of pent-up rage were unleashed upon their masters. They hunted down the slave owners, starting with Eunus's own master, Demophilus, and his wife. The only one they spared was their daughter, who had always shown kindness and compassion to them. This small act of mercy shows us that even in the midst of this brutal explosion of violence, there was still a flicker of humanity. News of the successful takeover of Eunus spread like wildfire across the island. Slaves everywhere saw their chance. They rose up, abandoning their fields and killing their overseers. The rebellion swelled from hundreds to thousands, then tens of thousands. Another leader emerged in the west, a man named Cleon, a Cilician slave herder who commanded his own force. Instead of fighting Eunus for control, he did something remarkable. He marched his 5,000 men to Eunus and declared his allegiance to King Antiochus, the new royal name Eunus had taken. Now, with a unified army, numbering close to 70,000, they were no longer just a mob. They were a kingdom. King Antiochus, Eunus, established a royal court, complete with a council, and even minted his own coinza direct challenge to Roman authority. This wasn't just a riot. It was a full-blown secession. They began to organize, capturing more cities like Tauromenium and Catania. For a brief, incredible moment, a large part of Sicily was a free kingdom ruled by former slaves. Rome initially was slow to react. They were overconfident. They sent a small force, a praetor with a few thousand men, thinking they could easily crush this slave rabble. They were wrong. The rebel army, fighting with the desperation of people who had nothing to lose, defeated 4 consecutive Roman armies. They used their knowledge of the rugged Sicilian terrain to their advantage, ambushing Roman columns and outmaneuvering the supposedly superior legions. The invincible Roman military machine was failing. For 2 years, the slave kingdom held its ground. The war was devastating Sicily, cutting off Rome's vital grain supply and causing food shortages and panic back in the capital. The Senate finally realized the scale of the threat. This wasn't just an island rebellion. It was an existential crisis. If the slaves in Sicily could win, what would stop the millions of other enslaved people across the empire from doing the same? So, Rome did what it always did when faced with a real threat. It brought overwhelming force. They sent not 1, but 2 consuls, the highest-ranking officials in the Republic with multiple legions. The new Roman commander, Publius Rupilius, was methodical and ruthless. He laid siege to the rebel strongholds of Tauromenium and Ina. The sieges were long and brutal. Trapped inside the cities, the rebels began to starve. The accounts from ancient historians are harrowing, describing people resorting to cannibalism to survive. At Tauromenium, the city finally fell when a traitor within the rebel ranks helped the Romans scale the walls. The defenders were captured and, as a gruesome warning to all, thrown from the cliffs. The final stand was at Enna, the heart of the rebellion. Cleon led a desperate charge out of the city, fighting to the last. He fell in battle, his body riddled with wounds, displayed before the walls to crush the remaining defenders' morale.
Eunus himself managed to escape, but he was hunted down and found hiding in a cave with a few of his closest attendants.
He wasn't given a warrior's death. He was thrown into a dungeon in Morgantina, where he was left to rot, eaten alive by lice. With the leaders gone, the rebellion collapsed. The Romans scoured the island, crucifying thousands of former rebels along the main roads. The message was clear and barbaric. This is the price of defiance.
The First Servile War was over, but its legacy echoed through history. Just 3 decades later, a second, even larger slave revolt would erupt on the same island.
And a few decades after that, a Thracian gladiator named Spartacus would lead the most famous slave uprising of them all. The story of Eunus and the Sicilian slaves is a brutal, tragic, but incredibly important reminder that the desire for freedom is a powerful and unquenchable force. It shows that even in the face of impossible odds, people will fight for their dignity and their right to be free. Thanks for watching! If you found this story as fascinating as I do, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of history. See you next time.